Hi, this is Matthew Clark, former interim chairman of the Economic Development Commission, bringing the EDC meeting of February 26th at 6:30 p.m. to order. So I'll just be acting as a lead member, as it were. We have a quorum here. We have all of our EDC members in attendance. Thank you, Sam, Cheryl, and everyone else for attending today. We also have two people from the audience, one person from our Economic Development, or excuse me, Planning and Zoning Commission. Mike, thank you for attending. And Joan, thank you for attending as well. We'll call this to order and we'll do public participation first. So I don't think there's anybody online, right?
Just Sam.
Just Sam. All participation. Audience.
No questions yet.
Joan, you okay? Okay. So we'll go for next approval of minutes. I think Mikey, you sent along the approval of the minutes, right?
They're filed and we did send them to you, but I don't have printed copies. So if you haven't had a chance to review them, I would say table it.
I did. You did as well?
I did.
Yeah. So the day that they came in, I read them over and said, okay, these are good. I don't know, Cheryl and Samantha, if you had a chance to take a look at this.
I did, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Move forward, I guess. Move
Sorry,
forward.
I'm having trouble with my microphone. I did not look at it. I'm sorry.
That's all right, not a problem. Entertain a motion.
Well, I'm not sure I'm not sure. Talking about something that we talked about last time, or is it something new?
No, this is a record. This is our written record of what we transpired at the last meeting.
Oh, okay. Oh, the minutes. Oh, no, I didn't look at the minutes.
Just abstain, that's all.
Yep.
So, entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I motion to approve the minutes from Monday, January 22nd, as John has prepared and forwarded.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Those are approved.
John does a good job.
Yes, he does. Commission business is the next thing on the agenda. We wanted to talk about our strategic plan kickoff discussion and thank you for attending. Ernie, can you properly pronounce your name so that I don't screw it up during the meeting continuously?
Blindberger.
Blindberger, thank you, Ernie, I appreciate it. So, by way of introduction, our situation here in Willington is that we're a small exurban rural community living right next door to a major research university. It's just far enough where there aren't that many opportunities to come to our town. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but so far, there's a lot of development in Mansfield, but not a lot of development here in Willington. There's housing, student housing. And those are in various areas, in various distances from the town. We do have some development. We have the FedEx warehouse. We have a factory building for testing procedures. We have the old mill and other ones as well, which other people can talk much more eloquently than I can. We recently had a big development opportunity come to Willington in terms of a mega warehouse, very huge building, and it was voted down by the townspeople in referendum. And just to give a general consensus, I think, open to what everyone else has to say about it, but it was the biggest warehouse you've ever seen in your life. For me, it was. It'd be like, give me directions to your house. Yeah, go down 84 East, excuse me. And when you reach the biggest warehouse you've ever seen in your life, take a right. That's my town. So that didn't pass, and there was various reasons, environmental reasons. There was a contamination issue. The sheer size of it was an issue, and the character of our town was an issue as well. So we're a town that has needs. We have financial needs. We have needs for schools. We have needs for school buildings. We have needs for public buildings. We have needs for programs. We have needs to enhance our tax base. And our tax base has been growing at about less than or equal to 1% a year. So our grand list is fairly stagnant. I think I'm speaking correctly. So we thought that it would be a good idea to try and do some kind of an economic development plan, if you will, or strategic plan. So to try and lay out a direction for Willington. And the best way to do this is not, the best way to have economic development is not to have something come by and then everybody getting all angry and upset about it. The best way to do this is to have some kind of a consensus in our community about what we want our town to be, continue to be, and what needs to change, and how we balance all these needs. So thought it'd be a good idea to try and do that. Now I see this as a process of laying out the facts, which is the financial facts. Here's our town, here's our needs, here's our taxes, here's our tax base, here's our projections and forecasts, but what we think is going to happen over the next 5 and 10 years. And then here's our needs and our financial forecasts based on needs that are expressed by the people of Willington. We want new buildings. We want lower taxes for residents, and we want business to pay more of it. Or we want to keep the amount of tax paid by residents kind of moderate. It'll go up a little, but in order to do that, we need more business. So what is that? How do we achieve that? So it's not, and then so we look at it from the expense side, and then we look at it on impact on tax base rates side, and then hopefully we can come to a consensus. I'd like to have our strategic plan be consensus building within the economic development group, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, Planning and Zoning Committee, and probably, yes, conservation as well. We have a plan of conservation and development. I read it. It's a good plan. It's now, I think, 5 or 6 years old, Mike, 1918, I think.
The POCD?
Yeah.
2018.
Yeah, 2018. But if we can bring people together, I mean, and I ran for selectman. I'm a selectman in town now, and I heard people say, on the one side, I do not want any development in my town. Don't put up any factory buildings. I don't want it. And I had other people say, my taxes are too high, and I look at the needs that our town has, and we need to have some development. So you need to do something, because I don't want to pay all these extra more taxes increases. Hopefully we can use this economic development strategic planning process to reach some kind of consensus between town leaders, public participation, facilitated by a consultant. Does anybody else on the group have, that's my introduction to this whole topic. Does anybody else have other stuff they want to say on that?
We, as a group, spent about a year, almost a year, under Rick was our previous chairman, coming up with amendments to the strategic development zone wording and what it's supposed to do and how we could use it. And this project, as Matt outlined, was probably too big of a pill to swallow at the time for the townspeople. The strategic development zoning that we had worked on implementing with the Planning and Zoning Commission is now on hold. So we need to, what can I say, revisit that to make sure it meets what we need to get done, what the town wants to get done going forward. The project was brought to us by a development firm, and truly, being a logistics guy that I am, we're 150 miles from everywhere. From a population base that's consuming, from a population base, generations passed down from 2 or 3 from my generation, doesn't want to shop, wants things delivered to their house. The way projects and services are being marketed now, it's based on, the tipping point is people are getting lazier, or they like things to be convenient. So Willington being 150 miles from Boston, from Albany, from New York City, from Providence, from Hartford, Bridgeport, has a number of assuming consumers to be served. And this big box theory is actually good for the manufacturers or the importers, because it takes somewhere between 35 to 40% of the cost of goods sold off the table. They don't have to have storefronts and employees. So it's a coming trend. The big box people who wanted to move into this 1.5 million square feet, although there were no tenants, I know they were talking to some of the big box people, including Amazon. And they walked away and went right down the street to Ashford and see if they would be interested. But we've got a rail here, we've got a highway, and we're in the right spot. We also have a whole bunch of students within 10 miles of this place. And if you look at UPS and FedEx, they love to have an employment route that they reach 3 days a week. Because the business is like this, not only during the day, but during the week and during the season. And students are ideal for that. They want money, they pay well, they can get benefits if they work 3 days a week. So that's why they're FedEx or RPS moved into town. So there's a lot of reasons why we backed away from the table on this. And then Mike got a little creative and found us some money. And we're glad you're here. The town, and pushing back on this I-84 distribution center, was everything from, as Matt had covered, from water levels to congestion to the highway to delay on trucks on 74 coming this way, and I don't want to drive behind a truck, or just a lot of inherent values that we all hold near and dear. We have to recognize that. That's part of it. But at the same time, we said, and I'm not sure this is part of strategy 5, but going back to what Matt said, a 5 or 10 year pro forma on cash flow. Best case, worst case, most likely, if we don't do anything.
Yes.
And
It is.
and we could sit down with our accounting people and come up with these type of projections on what it would mean for the tax base if the population doesn't grow, or if the income doesn't grow. I'm done.
Good summary. Good add-on. I'm gonna say, good add.
Yeah.
Are you okay?
I'm good.
Sam, you okay? Maybe the next step, Ernie, I don't know, I mean, help me out here, but I think probably the next step is just to go through the proposals. We have a clear understanding and meeting of the minds.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, perhaps just a few, opening remarks to let you know a little bit about, who I am and who we are and what we do. And, I have to say at the outset that, when, we received the RFP, and I read through that, it was just like, I mean, this is like right in our strike zone. I mean, this is the core of what I've been doing for 30 years. And I've done this work in 300 cities and towns throughout North America over the last 30 years. And it has involved everything from broad scale, entire urban downtown revitalization plans, which we talk forever about, what I've done elsewhere. We really want to talk about what, we can do and will do here in Willington. But just so you'll know, so these things have ranged from, commercial projects of a wide variety, housing, hotels and conference centers, performing arts centers, public aquariums, a symphony hall, a minor league baseball stadium, a lot of different types of projects, warehousing and distribution. I do, in the last 10 years or a little bit more, I've a little sub niche I've got into is airport landside development planning as part of airport master plans. And so I'm currently working on my 14th airport master plan. in Lansing, Michigan. And all getting ready to start a smaller market analysis piece for landside development at the Ocala Airport in Florida. And so these airport projects get into a lot of the warehousing, distribution, the logistics, supply chain, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm familiar with a lot of different kinds of different tourism, outdoor recreation and so forth and so on. So I think, part of it in a project like this is that we want to come in with a sort of a holistic approach, that we don't have any preconceived ideas about exactly what, may work or what's not going to work. Although I've spent a fair amount of time reading the POCD, which is my ad was completed in 2018. 2018. So you're right about it. 60% time arc of when that plan, was put in this part. That I'd like to come back and talk to a little bit about, but then also there was a market study that was done back in 2015 that I've been studying as well. And they're, good professional work products. And I, reading through so far, I don't disagree with anything that I've read so far, but I'm getting my, building the knowledge base beyond what already exists. And I have, in 2023, I completed the economic and fiscal impact analysis for multifamily housing in Tolland. So the town of Tolland is a client. We'll finish that work now, but that was an interesting study that wasn't an affordable housing plan, but they wanted to get a handle on was there going to be a net gain or a net loss. You're talking about cash flow, what would be the fiscal impact implications of new housing of various types and number of unit counts and so forth and so on. And then also in 2023, I did an affordable housing plan for a private developer as part of their bigger development proposal for a fairly sizable project in Mansfield. And so over the last year, I've become pretty conversant in sort of the sort of sub-regional economy here in this area, the demographic trends and so forth. So I'm not completely starting from a walk, but we're getting up to speed. And part of that process is first and foremost, becoming familiar with the lay of the land, as it were. And so I came down earlier this afternoon and have traversed some of the major I don't know if you can see the yellow markings on this. You can maybe pass if you just want to pass that around. This is where kind of my travels have taken me today, and so been able to at least get a feel for the travel center, the Phelps Community Center, Retail Center, the South Willington area, the Mill District, I'll call it. I don't think we call it the Hall Mills or Hall District. I've done a couple of successful textile mill redevelopment projects, so I'm very intrigued with what's going on there. It looks like there's some cool stuff, some arts and some retail, and I'm looking forward to getting down there and exploring that on the next trip. Then angled over into stores and got a sense of the university. I kind of knew where it was, but I never really fully understood the connections, So I don't have a full understanding of that yet, but I did get a taste of it today. And there's a lot going on over there. And, I know the university, it's a logical source of interest and demand and economic activity, and the Willington's close, really. And this was something that came up in the work that we were doing in Tolland, and there seemed to be kind of a general feeling that, yeah, the university is this huge economic engine, but it doesn't really emanate much, apparently. I don't know if that's true or not, but, you know,
Willington Pizza would all be with you about that.
Willington Pizza. And I was touted on Willington Pizza, and in my travels, I drove past the original as well as the Willington Pizza too, so I'm clued in on that front, so next time we'll put that on the menu.
The lunch menu.
But nonetheless, I mean, university, what's going on there, I mean, that bears further analysis and further look-see. You know, I've worked with a number of universities on different projects, and so I know a little bit about, you know, how they function, what they like, what they don't like, opportunities that they're looking for. So I have no idea if there's, you know, any fruit that can be harvested there, but we're gonna look. So we're getting familiar with the land, we're getting familiar with the various reports. Mike and John have been very good helping to supply me with zoning maps and other materials, you know, that we're including. This all kind of is under the heading of like our work area 1, which we just sort of generally refer to as preliminary research. But so we're making good headway there. And the land use analysis, we're just getting started with that, but that's underway as well. The market analysis, work area 3, we're, you know, getting our feet wet with that as well. And I guess it may be worth mentioning that we kind of this a little bit differently than some firms might, in terms of this, what I call this holistic approach, you know, to market analysis and economic analysis. The work that was done for the POCD as well as this market study are again, you know, I think are very good quality professional work products. And so, you know, kind of you want to balance work that's already been done, data that's, you know, baseline data or data that you can build on. So, you know, how much do you really need to reinvent the wheel is kind of what I'm trying to, you know, get out here. And so we want to build on the work that's come before, and but then take a fresh look at things and some market sectors that may have some possible liability that I don't see mentioned in either of these studies. I was talking with the lady downstairs a little earlier about things like outdoor recreation. She had mentioned a golf course, like a you know, what would you call it? A short hole golf course. In neither of these that I read so far, anyway, I've read the economic development sections. Do things like outdoor recreation isn't mentioned. Hospitality and lodging, hotels isn't mentioned. You know, things like eco or tourism, you know, ecotourism, agritourism, cultural tourism, historic, or none of that's mentioned. So I think these are things like that that we will say, okay, look, they got a pretty good statistical and data handle on, you know, light manufacturing or whatever it might be. But some of these other market sectors that we want to look into as well. And so we'll be doing that.
So you went through, correct me if I'm wrong, but you went through work area 1, which is preliminary research, right?
We're involved in that now, yes.
There's more to be done, and that's outlined here. Then we have work area 2, which is the land use analysis, that's what we were just talking about.
Right.
And the short hole course. Ecotourism, I think we have someone who actually sells time on the farm to work as a farmhand. Need to do a little.
Agritourism.
Yeah, right,
as they call
exactly. Right. as an old farm guy, it's astounding to me, but.
And there could be some other aspects of the sort of the broader agricultural industry, if you want to call it, agricultural sector. You know, the university, UConn, correct me if I'm wrong, was a state agricultural, like, a land grant school, what do they call it? I graduated from the University of Maryland. It was similarly an agricultural school, you know. And so it'd be interesting to find out kind of what they're up to these days in the world of agriculture, because as you know, I mean, everything, you know, technology is becoming so ubiquitous in everything that we do, and with AI and everything, I mean, holy cow, in the hose, but suffice to say, other sectors, like these macro sectors, like the life sciences, for example, you know, have a direct relationship and interrelationship with agriculture, for example, as they do with aerospace, as they do with supply chain and logistics. So, you know, we want to look at it all, but agriculture also really isn't mentioned in either of these reports. And so there's exciting things happening on all fronts these days. And the housing piece we'll be looking into further along as we go. The Tallinn study, bottom line, showed essentially that additional multifamily housing was a net fiscal gain for them, you know.
For the business.
Well, that too. Yeah, so it had the fiscal impacts, the tax revenues, basically. And we balanced against any additional potential costs for the schools, systems, and things like that, you know. And just to boil it down to a simple number, worked out that, you know, about the midpoint in terms of number of units and all the things that we did, worked out to about $1 million a year, you know, extra, if the town allowed and built, you know, or had a developer build multifamily housing. And it was, you know, things like we were talking, Joe and I were talking about senior housing, you know, and we included senior housing as a type of multifamily in the analysis that we did for Tallinn. That's even a little bit more lucrative, if that's the word, because, you know, it's like almost no students involved. But even in the units that would be just market rate, you know, the number of the students per capita per unit was very small. So I think for the maximum number of units that we looked at was 250, and even at the maximum 250 units of a different mix, it was only about 25 students. You know? So it's this, you know, this kind of balancing and weighing is
Was it,
you know,
was it based on public investment or just private investment? Or
private investment.
Private. Any TIFs involved?
I'm sorry.
Was there a TIF involved at all by the town?
No, no. And then we also, part of that analysis on to dwell in Tallinn, but, and I've had, Mike, I think probably has a copy of it, but I'd be happy to get you a copy if you know, at some point, if you'd like to, if you guys would like to read through that, but, and then we did a capture analysis for the businesses in Tallinn. So based on, you know, the demographics, the expenditure potential that we estimated based on various things, we were able to arrive at a number of, if you had 250 multifamily units, you know, how much would be spent on food, for example, you know, how much food that you buy at a grocery store, how much you get delivered, how much you spend on apparel, automotive, et cetera, et cetera. And so there was a positive economic impact there as well. I think, just off the top of my head, I think it kind of boiled down to about around $5 million a year, $5 to $8 million a year
Really?
extra that would be spent in with Tallinn businesses and to varying degrees depending on what the business was.
Our ability to recoup some of that or show some of that net benefit is limited because our options here within town are limited. And we have restaurants, we don't have a bank, we don't have a supermarket, we don't have, gas stations. We have no general merchandise that I'm aware of, see what I mean? Anyway,
Well, and so the market analysis that was done in 2015, I was running out of color ink toward the end here. They did a fairly in-depth, like a leakage
Yeah.
analysis. And it shows that there's a significant amount of leakage from Willington. Again, it's a chicken or the egg, right? You know, you don't have the grocery store or whatever. So people are gonna go
We had
to
one
the
years
big
ago,
Y.
it couldn't make it.
Hmm?
We had one years ago, it couldn't make it.
Couldn't make it, yeah. So we wanna figure out what can make it, you know, and balance the vision of the community and the town. I mean, clearly there was a lesson learned there with the big warehouse project. And I'd like to learn more about that. I don't know if there was ever like a feasibility study done or.
you know, that's because it didn't have, I mean, we have a submission under the special guidelines.
Yeah.
We have a submission under the special guidelines, but it wasn't well developed, it didn't have to be well developed. To be conceptual.
We have, sorry, I didn't interrupt you. I could share with you the application materials. As part of that, they did the EDC spearheaded the drafting of the language, which enabled the development. We called it the strategic development zone. The reason it was initially drafted and crafted was because the town was approached by Advanced CT at the time. It's now, or maybe it was CERC, it's Advanced CT now, because they had the state was in the running for a data center from a company that was not based in the United States. Willington has, as far as I can tell, is the only town in Connecticut that has 2 parcels in excess of 100 acres right off the highway. One's 160, one's 300. So they found those 2 parcels and they reached out saying, we've got this project. The state's trying to compete. We're submitting your parcels that we have here as trying to get these, I think it was German, kind of, you know, Connecticut is the place to go. And so that sort of was the catalyst for thinking about how to come up with a process. So we drafted the strategic development zone, which was a 2-part zoning regulation, which allows developers to effectively choose when they take the risk. So they can go the proactive approach where they do a conceptual site rendering and site plan and have their public hearings for that to land the zone. And then they come back with 100% site plan, but because they didn't do the design, they gotta do they have to do a public hearing again. Or and the idea there was get a conceptual from the town, get it endorsed, then you can go to your users and say, we've got buy-in. And then they'll spend the money. Or they can do all their design up front. They can come in with a full-blown site plan, fully engineered, have the public hearing, land the zone, get the approval, and then when they come back for their final, no public hearing because it's a site plan and it's already been designed. So we wrote that with in response to what was the data center. And then almost within a month of adopting that plan, the developers that had wrapped up the parcel on the highway reached out to start the process to get that project in front of the commission. They had already wrapped the parcel up, but then in their due diligence realized the town was going through this process and decided it made more sense.
Not in front of the commission, in front of the planning and zoning committee.
Planning and zoning commission, yeah.
Right.
So we had that whole reg, it was drafted in that specific way. And the idea was in Connecticut, strategic development stuff that's done like that under a development district gives towns the maximum amount of leverage and latitude So the commission could essentially have denied it for any reason, and you're more protected than under the traditional development process. So the commission denied it for several reasons as mentioned. Following that, the regulation was essentially dismantled. We started with a moratorium, trying to figure out what to do. There was a private application submitted by a resident, I think the resident that prepared that note card, trying to make those amendments, and the commission basically decided to take the whole regulation apart, leave the title, so that we have the regulation on the books, but it's not functional. And then most recently, we talked about this with planning and zoning at their last meeting, and they,
I have a comment on that, but go ahead.
the commission, the planning and zoning commission, who obviously ultimately adopted the SDZ, agreed that it didn't make sense to move forward with any amendments of the SDZ until the strategic plan was finished.
There's some people, this is a political thing.
Right.
So it gets a little icky. So there's a lot of folks who think, okay, you guys did this STZ knowing that this huge warehouse was gonna come into our town. You planned it this way. And we didn't plan it, I don't think anybody planned it that way, but it doesn't matter. They saw this thing that they didn't want. They knew this thing came before it. Who knows? I mean, I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. I mean, it's just, these things happen,
Right.
so.
Well, yeah, and, you know, this is all good and this is all relevant, you know, and we're talking about go just in the land use analysis, you know, one of the first things, let me back up here a second. So these work areas are not like rigidly sequential, you know, like where, okay, we do work area one, and then when we're done with that, then we go to work area two. You know, a lot of this is all happening somewhat at the same time.
Yeah.
Some more getting it a bit more at the end and so forth. But anyway, with the land use analysis, you know, we need to figure out, understand exactly what we have to work with in terms of land that can be developed that's currently zoned for XYZ type of development, you know, and then specifics about, you know, ownership, size of the you know, acreage, is it for sale, values and so forth and so on, so that, you know, we really get a good handle on the land resources that you have or don't have, as the case may be, you know. So that we start, because, you know, I'm very project oriented, you know, and so I have a good, you know, beefy study document, you know, with all the bells and whistles, but, you know, your RFP requires basically 3 alternative development scenarios be, you know, fleshed out, my words. And so we are going to do that. And so what we'd like to see come out of, what I like to see, and I'm committed to as a result of a process like this and a project like this, is some some development projects that you can really, that you can sink your teeth into, you know, and move forward with, that have the demonstrated economic logic or the market logic that makes sense, that has the buy-in of the community, at least to the extent you're always gonna have, you know,
Right.
opinions, but at least you know, we wanna be sensitive to the town's history and the culture and you know, the character, you know, the physical character of the town and all of that, again, this holistic, you know, kind of view of things. And so, so we gotta get a really good solid handle on the land and a personal understanding, but as well as, you know, all the valued input from Mike and John and you guys, community.
So maybe it might be helpful it's okay with you guys, maybe we can go through each of these, you can start it off,
Yeah.
I'd like to get, a
Yeah.
little bit fleshed out on each one, but we talked about work area one. First of all, let me just read for everyone, we don't have a copy of this on the screen, if anybody wants to come back to this. There are 9 work areas. Work area 1 is preliminary research, work area 2 is land use analysis, our group here has just discussed those 2. Work area 3 is market analysis, and Ernie, I'd like to go over each of those 3 through 9, but market area analysis, public outreach process. 5 is conceptual development programs. 6 is economic fiscal impact analysis. 7 is funding and finance strategy. 8 is implementation action plan. 9 is economic development strategic plan final report. I'd like to add a 10 if I can, but maybe it's just under strategic plan, but presentation of conclusions and recommendations along with what we think about that. So we were on, I think we were on 3, right? Which is market analysis. Maybe you can give us a thumbnail view of market analysis, if we haven't already done that.
So again, we don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel or spend the time and, the budget on reinventing it, but, so we've got some good baseline information.
Yep.
That we're gonna build on, but we want to look at, other sectors that may have been overlooked in the past, or for whatever reason,
Got it.
not a criticism, but just, based on our view of the world.
And things change.
Yeah, and things change.
Right.
I mean, this was done before COVID.
Right.
Before the rollout of AI
Right.
to the whole world.
Exactly.
When you look at the 2 projects, one in Tallinn and one in Mansfield, I mean, we're all part of Tallinn County. Is there any cross-pollination between Willington, Mansfield, and Tallinn with regards to some of the market analysis you did there? I'm sure there has to be, but maybe not for the projects that you were looking at.
Yeah,
Tallinn has somewhere in the area of 170 small businesses,
Mhm,
including Big Y. I
mhm,
mean, we probably got a dozen.
mhm.
Right.
So there's a little different in the economic model.
Right, and yet, as you say, I mean, you're all, existing in the same, ecosystem is a very favored term in planning and economics right now, but, you are in an ecosystem here, because you're the university, you're physically connected, and so how all that works is something that we'll, be trying to
Right.
suss out and illustrate to the advantage of Willington, but.
We think about this, we have, Mega University, I-84, and rail.
Yeah.
And we have all 3 coming together in our town.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, I think it was when we were on our video chat, sometime back with the commission here, but I had brought up in that meeting a flow, meaning the traffic count. So what's the traffic? I wonder what the traffic counts on 84 going past here are. And I had a number in my mind. Mike looked it up. I think it was like
Millions.
maybe like 10 million cars or 15 million in one direction. So you got like,
It's over 10,000 a day in either direction. I don't know if it's something on both sides, but.
It's a lot.
For some reason, Boston gets more, and I get a little less this way.
Yeah.
Don't understand that, but.
it's a lot of vehicle traffic. Now, you've already got a business that's capturing that economic flow. And I'd like to meet with somebody from that company,
Which,
the truck stop, the TA.
yeah, we have the TA and then.
And I also want to meet with somebody from FedEx, and we'll talk about a little bit this more in the public outreach, but, so it's looking, for those.
We had
Unfilled
not
opportunities.
years ago, a couple of years ago, I think, we reached out to, I think it was somebody in Newtown or Weathersfield, their Economic Development Commission.
Right, Berlin.
Chris, Finch.
And he wanted to take a ride through town, and he wanted to know where Main Street was, and where was the Becker? And three of us had three different ideas.
Common.
Yeah, come. So,
Well, you know, it's, but that's okay. I mean, you know, it's, every town is different and, but you know, you look at the resources that you have to work with. Again, well, the obvious one, you know, being 84, the university and so forth. So anyway, so, I mean, our explanation of the market analysis here is only basically one paragraph, but it's fairly extensive and, but designed to arrive at not just an academic understanding of what the market is, you know, it's, and data, you can, my God, now with, nowadays with the internet, you can, I could run off 500 pages of data this afternoon, I mean, you know, but I'm very adamant about consultants that there's kind of two schools of thought on this, just not to diverge, but one is you give the client like all the data, you give them the information and then let them decide what to do with it. The other one is that, you know, I believe strongly in that the data is important and all the information is important, but it's like, it's a consultant's job to do, is to say, well, what does it all, what does it mean? You know, not just here it is, but what does it mean? And what does it mean to you in terms of the goals that you're trying to achieve? So,
If I could.
yeah, sorry.
So that's all right. So if we move to public outreach
Yeah.
process, I'd like to be able to say that we can have some kind of a, like, I was thinking before we have this introduction thing, but I'd like to be able to do 2 times when we have sort of public meetings. I don't know what the proper
Right.
is, more than just one of these meetings. It's not a work group meeting. Where we can build in 2 milestones and a final report. So that would be, or 1 milestone with a final report. I don't know.
Well,
But I'd like to be able to build in a milestone or 2 that says, here's where we are with our process of the Economic Development Commission. You're invited to the library.
Mhm.
Or you're invited to the school or whatever.
Right.
Or it could be here, I don't care.
so, no, absolutely. And in our contract, our scope, so we talk about the value that I place on one-on-one stakeholder interviews, which I'll come back to in a second, but specifically to your point, so we say that in addition to the stakeholder interviews, we propose to lead at least 2 public workshops of a form and function to be determined in consultation with the client group as the planning process unfolds, you know, and so we're adept at that. I've won a couple of awards for my public outreach efforts from American Planning Association and one from the Urban Land Institute. And so we will do those, you know, and at the appropriate time, I think, you know, rather than just kind of launch into at the very outset with one of these town hall meetings that says like, well, what do you want your town to be?
I don't want that.
You guys have done that. You've done a good job of it, you know, and so I'd rather come in a little bit later down the road when I can speak intelligently
Yeah.
with you all about some specifics,
Yeah.
sites or general sites and some preliminary findings of market work and so forth and so on. You know.
That's the first one. Maybe the second one can be, here's what we see from the expense grand list
You're right.
needs
Right.
side, the financial analysis of your town in terms of
And if it-
what it
if it
will
turn-
look like.
And if it turns out to be, you know, a third, or, and then a fourth as far as like, it's a final, I'm not hung up on the number, you know.
I'm good. By the way, we're a congenial group here. There's no real rules regarding public participation, so it's not like planning and zoning where you can't talk.
It's kinda
So
curious.
if you guys have a comment or
Feel free to
suggestion.
jump in.
please
All right.
jump in.
So, I'm sorry,
No, continue, please.
so the stakeholder interviews I mentioned in the scope to do between 25 and 35. I did my first one today, Kathy, the librarian. It's one down, took 34 to go, but we had a very nice chat, you know, I mean, I make a
She's a
little bit
member
of
of
a
the capital
late.
improvement committee as well.
And so we had a nice talk, you know, and I looked through some historical books about the history of Wilmington and so forth,
Yeah,
but,
the older lady, I can't think of her last name right now, and she's been here, I don't know, since God created the earth.
Okay. I got it.
She's been in the library for years and years, so she's a good person to
I
give
got it.
you history as well, because a lot of us are in the library,
Thank you.
we're very recent.
Maybe one of the first things that we can do as a group is come up with a list.
so I was just gonna say that
No, sorry.
I welcome and would request suggestions about folks to meet with, and I'll work with Mike and John, we'll start putting that together, but like I said, the TA, how do you refer to this, the TA stop, the TA,
Yeah.
The TA on this side of 84 and then Love's is on the other side.
both in the town of Willington.
Yep, Love's
Yeah,
is
and
just.
I neglected to check out the Loves. In my mind, for some reason, I had Willington kind of stopping at the.
Do we have any kind of relationship with those folks in terms of,
Well, multiple different type, but we have a contact at each. And on the other side of 84 is Love's, and there's also Moose Meadows on that side, campground.
Yeah.
It's a small campground that's over there as well. Just a little piece of the town is over on that way, but
So folks like that, a representative from the FedEx facility, they may have like may have a contact or like a public information officer.
I work with the facilities guy. He's not there all the time because he's got a bunch of places, but this facility FedEx owns, they don't lease. So it's operated a little bit differently than the other ones that are closer to the airport, but we've got contact.
Okay.
would,
So we'll start, so
Yeah.
add to that list, you know, and I'd like to meet with someone or a group or other folks from the mill
yeah, that's what is it?
area, in the scheme of things. I would normally also like to meet with representative like of the historical commission or
Yeah, good guy.
group,
So
and so on.
what do you think about including, what I call town leaders, but, you know, we have folks in the fire,
Yeah.
community, we have folks in the library, and we have folks in the, financial area, from, board of finance.
Yeah.
Planning and zoning, to get input from those folks on what because each of these people is gonna bring their own,
Right.
they're representing 100 people behind them that have talked to them over the years about stuff. What
Absolutely.
they wanna see, what they wanna happen.
Absolutely. And then we'll just coordinate on the best way. It depends, sometimes on the individual or how a client or the town wants to handle it, but we'll coordinate the best way to do that outreach, whether it's just me calling or Mike or someone calls and says, Ernie Blindberger, Strategy 5, I'd like to chat with you. And, a lot of it can be done, with Zoom these days. I mean, I like to do it in person, but for that matter, sometimes I think more people are just almost more comfortable doing things like that with virtually rather than having me, show up at their.
The business list that I gave you, the first
Yeah.
page is the Briggs recipients. We have, obviously that was very recent. So like those businesses, and they're not all big, huge impact, large footprint type folks, because when we wrote the eligibility requirements, folks like FedEx and Dollar General wouldn't qualify.
Right.
But anybody that's on that list that's of interest, we obviously would have,
Okay.
they're very familiar with us because we've reached out and like followed surveys and we've worked with them on all the agreements. So those would be very easy to set up.
You mentioned some other things. I don't want to get, I also want to guard against getting pigeonholed about what's already been done, what we already know.
Right.
And, I'd be interested in a document or something that says, these are some of the things that we've done or things we've seen for other groups in your area, and these are some of the resources we can tap into. Let me just give you an example, and then you mentioned, extreme outdoors or something like that. And, there's probably an extreme outdoors association out there, and there's probably operators of these places, that we can tap into to understand what this is, how much we're talking about and what the needs are. And then, sliding it into, one of the potential, I apologize, I'm not using the right CDXs or something like that from the proposal. Is that something that would be in the, okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
So I think, and then we go through, work area 5, conceptual development, programs, which is just what I was talking about. Help us understand, if you can give a thumbnail sketch of that, and then we'll move on to the next one. That's okay.
So-
Am I handling this okay, by the way? Is this all right? Is this all right, the way we're going about
Yeah,
this?
perfect,
All right,
fine, perfect, yeah. Perfect. So the conceptual development programs links directly to the request for proposal element to ask for the 3 alternative scenarios, okay, at the very least. And so what we like to do is, so if we got a piece of property, and it can be a specific piece of property, or these conceptual development programs can be left site neutral. Okay, so I prefer to do it with at least some realistic site in mind, but yeah, it can be done even more, a little higher level of conceptual planning. But the more specific, the more real we can make it, the better. Because the CDPs drive a lot of the numbers in these work areas that follow, okay? And so conceptual development program, typically I'll do in like words and numbers. So this 5-acre site can accommodate 40,000 square feet of building. So it's almost like a massing diagram sort of a process, right? So like how much building of some kind can go on this property in a way that is not overwhelming necessarily, like what happened with the other one. How do you get in? How do you get out? So we do some preliminary sort of problem solving about access, parking, infrastructure. I understand infrastructure is, kind of an underlying issue here with economic development, the public or the lack of water and sewer, which I want to get into some more detail on that as we go through the study. But so if you have a building program, then I like to be able to illustrate that in kind of a schematic plan. Okay, so you got the site, and then you've got rectangles or a couple L-shaped buildings, and it can be rendered a little bit, make it look nice, but it gives people a sense of kind of order of magnitude in terms of the mass, kind of what it could look like, how it would fit into the landscape, again, very conceptual, but with the number, we call it the 40,000 square feet, that drives a bunch of other stuff. So that building, we'll estimate the capital costs, I prefer to call it capital investment in that building, whatever use that the market analysis and so forth will help to suggest. So it's 40,000 feet, and the unit cost per square foot for whatever it is $400 a square foot. It's at $16 million, and so forth. So these all the numbers start to fall into place, and you're not just pulling the numbers out of the air, you can go back, and I like to have our analysis be very transparent. So, a lot of times I'll put the actual, it's mostly arithmetic, to be honest with you, some math, a little bit of algebra, a few algorithms sprinkled in here and there, but basically I like the client to be able to say, so if I can say the answer is $1 million, well, how did he get $1 million? You know? Oh, okay, he took this plus this minus this times that. Okay, that's how I got $1 million. I said, okay, I understand that. So,
So, a question about
Yeah.
CDPs. I mean, can those be packaged? Can that product of this thing be packaged as, look, we've done this kind of work and we've run it past our community and they want this kind of thing?
right, and so this gets in now, this is where the beauty of this approach, because it's, we're not doing a marketing plan, okay? Because that's a little different. Marketing, you understand, but not everyone gets the distinction, but anyway. But these work products can be used in the implementation and action plan, okay? To make a very nice presentation package for the private sector.
Mike, do you have any experience with Tai Chi in putting together packages like that and marketing and different conceptual ideas associated with specific properties?
I've done that in other communities where we've engaged with Advanced CT, Metro Hartford Alliance, DECD. And actually, when the EDC was talking about trying to figure out kind of what strategy to take and different things, I'm not sure if the whole EDC was a part of it or if it was, I know Rick at least was, we had a meeting about trying to have the state through DCD give the town the non-used portion of the rest stops that are in Willington. There's a significant portion of land they own that is not part of that. So we've done some of that, but the complicated part for us is that bringing that information, there's only so much we can do in the way of saying, if you build this, if you say you're gonna build this, you'll get an approval to build this, right? Because,
No, it's just
But,
there's
yeah.
a different way of going about it. I mean, it's like the old tombstone ads in the Wall Street Journal. All you have to do is be able to say, Willington has looked at this and we're interested in these kinds of things.
yeah, and the
There it is.
conversations that Advanced CT and others have said is statewide, it's not a shortage. There's not a shortage of projects and people looking for things. It's just a matter of how many boxes does your parcel and your community,
Right.
your process check.
Right.
So yes, we've
Yeah,
definitely.
You understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah, absolutely, and to be clear, so I've done many marketing plans.
Yeah.
And which usually take the form of like, what we call like a developer solicitation.
Right.
Okay, but you come up with it's like a brochure and using, that internet and so forth and so on. And, we can get into a good deal of that, hopefully, in the implementation, that's work area 8. But it's the information, so the conceptual site plans, we're working through a lot of what a developer would normally have to spend a lot of time and money to try and guess at and to work through in a community, just going in blind, well, where's the development part? Where could I build my R&D shop, so we're saying, here's sites, here's what the zoning allows, here's the rules of the road, here's what we're looking for, and here's the market logic, the economic logic, you should take a look at this, and, the more green lights you can have down Developer Avenue, I think I used that with you before, it's the better off you are, and the closer you are to success. So that, and so the certain amount of feasibility work gets wrapped into this, and so we want to be able to show,
Scared myself.
how a particular business, maybe not an actual feasibility study for that particular business. We can do that too, but.
Right. So if we look at, by the way, Bill, I think there's places where you can actually list those kinds of things, right? I mean, you know that in the railroad industry, there's places where you list these opportunities or, communications that say, that are searchable. There's searchable databases for everything these days. Are there searchable databases for different verticals to look at in terms of, where these kinds of things could be listed? I don't know.
Locally, Advanced CT allows towns to publish 5 sites to what used to be called the CERC Site Finder, which is almost like a little mini Connecticut commercial MLS.
Yeah,
And towns can submit 5 parcels. So we could do that, there's no cost. And when we were approached, when the state identified the parcels for the data center, they were interested in knowing zoning, speed to market, essentially, right? How quickly can we get an endorsement and approval? They also wanted to know about power. We worked as best we could to get information about that, which is tricky because Eversource won't commit to providing power if they don't know the user. They wanted to know about water and sewer, which we don't have. They also wanted to know, which kind of brings me to one of the things that I hope we can think about as we get further. Willington does not have any mechanism for tax abatements. And the challenging part is because of the way many towns in Connecticut are set up, a small town meeting form of government, is that the only way for that to happen would be to adopt an ordinance, then, which would be approved at a town meeting, and then kind of go from there with the actual agreement. And the challenge with that is, if you do that with a project on the table, it's all focusing around whatever that one project is. And so if you think about the concept of being able to offer that without a project on the table, it makes that negotiation or discussion a little bit neutral. And so we don't have that here, but a lot of places, Tallinn pushes that heavily. When there's people that come in and say, we want to do anything, it could be an existing business creating new jobs. They just have an ordinance that says we can give it to people, the town council can do this. We don't even have that as an offering. So I hate to keep coming back to the trade center, but this most recent development example,
Right.
they wanted to run water. It would have been $20 million. Connecticut Water gave them an estimate. They would have run it from Mansfield all the way down River Road. That was the only way to get the water that they needed if they had to. And they would have done it. That was a number that they were comfortable
and
with.
you would have been able to tap into it for future development.
Yeah,
Well,
but, you know,
so that whole truck stop, I mean, that's,
all well.
Well,
Community well.
Litchfield.
okay, FedEx too.
FedEx is on a huge well system.
So I don't want to get sidetracked, but on the only significant body of water we have is the pond, right?
They have, yeah, there's some dry hydrants that are there.
No, I'm thinking long-term, 25 years from now, there's only one significant body of water that could be polluted in our town, and that is the pond.
They're smaller, yes. The for water quality, Roaring Brook, the Fenton River are pretty high quality water courses, and then we have some aquifer protection in watershed areas. But one of the things that I think we really need to have here is a template. It may not be necessarily be a template, but if not a thought process of how the town should go about evaluating development, so that if a month after we finish this plan, someone shows up and says, I want to build this.
Right.
If we have nothing else, the town should at least understand neutrally how to evaluate it. One of the things being, if they say they need a tax abatement, a lot of places may actually need one, because there's so much more costs associated with, we don't have water, we don't have sewer, we don't have natural gas, we may not have phase 3 power. Some places may not need it. And,
Right. Well, and this, gosh, so again, this is all good and important information and topics to be analyzed and worked into this study, but, talking about like water sewer, no water sewer, apparently you've got some very high quality spring water in this town, which I won't go off on a tangent on that, but that's of interest. But, they're doing so many wonderful things with, I don't know what they're calling it now, but, green building, LEED certified stuff where everything's being you know, the rain's being captured, and not, development isn't as dependent as it used to be on municipal infrastructure, because they're building stuff out in the deserts and the jungles and and so, but it also, that tends to be more environmentally responsible, if that's the word, and so if that's the reality in Willington, that wells and septic,
Yeah.
let's make that the best we can make it. And, make it as attractive as possible to, in a private sector to come in and say,
Mhm.
yeah, we want to do a really cool, building here that's gonna be, do all those things and not necessarily, I'm a little bit dreaming along here just a little bit tonight, but that's not necessarily dependent on water. So we'll want to look at that.
If it's okay with everyone, I'll move on to the next one. So that's work area 6, economic and fiscal impact analysis. And I think this is looking at financial projections. That's the portion of this workflow falls into.
Right. So this is about tax revenues.
Right.
Primarily, that's the fiscal impact. So fiscal impacts, fiscal revenues or taxes,
Right.
fiscal costs or fire, police,
Yeah.
safety, schools, things like that. So, we'll want to look at the books
Right.
to some extent, to see, and then we can kind of overlay a conceptual development program
Right.
for site one, whatever that is.
Right.
And we say, well, if this gets built based on the investment of building it, apply the levy, rate, and that will yield arithmetic, extra $300,000 a year in property tax, whatever.
And then what that means for either, a reduction in taxes or an increase in services.
Right.
I think that's a real important part right now, because there's such a huge desire in this town by a lot of people for more community services. But there's gotta be a way to get there to actually be able to afford it. And a lot of people have just.
And there's 2 ways.
Correct.
To do that. One is to raise taxes on everyone who lives in town. The other one is not to raise taxes on everyone who lives in town, but to increase development. And it's a catch-22.
And it's been tried to be driven home time after time, but everybody thinks there's ideas of, well, if we have all these little tiny businesses, somehow that will amount to this, and we can then do this. And there's a lot of misconception that that's not really feasible to get what you ultimately want.
The other thing is, I think I thank you for chiming in. I agree. And the other thing that pops to my mind is, people look at things from their perspective. So from my perspective, an extra $400 a month in my mortgage bill is not fun. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Let it rip.
No, it's not a problem. For my neighbor, it is a problem. I can't do that to my neighbor. 100, okay. Combined with business development. Now we're in a negotiating solution finding mechanism here.
What's the term? Utils of satisfaction, what you're willing to pay to get something else. So if you're willing to pay a bit more in taxes, but you can get these other services, it's how you can also approach the individuals in this town and, bring it all together. We can bring in this business and it'll add to A, you might have to contribute B, but then you'll get C from it. So
now we can sort of get people to look at things in this kind of way, using an economic development strategic plan, and say, well, okay, let's talk about it beforehand, before the thing comes to a referendum.
Right.
Anyway. All right, we're treading familiar ground.
And so the economic part of the analysis is more about like job creation, spending by visitors in the local economy, things like that. So economic and fiscal,
Right,
right?
right.
And can businesses capture, more than they are? And then just a note on the gentleman's comment about, small businesses. So, I'd like to see among many outcomes of this strategic plan to be balanced in the sense that small businesses are important. I mean, I run a small business,
Myself.
and so they are important, they have their place. We want to try and come out of this with a couple, as I said, projects to sink our teeth into. It may be, small business thing, whatever that turns out to be. Small businesses, by and large, are not gonna really tip the fiscal scales, as you pointed out, and so they can contribute, they're good, they help the quality of life, the convenience of the citizens, and so on, so forth, and so on. But it'd be nice to have at least one pretty, big hitter of some kind, that can really pop the tax rolls measurably. And then maybe one that's something in between.
Right. Or two or three, something in between. But
Two or
yeah,
three, yeah.
Yeah.
But balance is key.
So if we can move on to work area 7, funding and finance strategy.
Right.
Private investment levels needed to achieve the plan's goals and objectives are estimated.
Right.
So this is, would that be packaged under or reported under the you have an acronym that I can't remember.
The CDP?
CDPs?
Well, so the CDP results feed into this
Okay.
as well, okay? So the question always is gonna become, it's like, well, this all sounds great, but how are we gonna pay for it, right? And so the simple solution is you get the private sector to pay for it. So you get the development company or, Bayer Pharmaceuticals, they got a few bucks, right? I mean, so you want the private sector to really carry the weight of the front of the cost, okay, which I like to call investment. Cost, it is cost, but it's their investment, private sector's investment. However, depending, it's, too early to say, but there may be some public costs, typically, just generally speaking, in this world, there may be some public costs required to induce or trigger that private investment. Typically, that might be in some kind of infrastructure. We need to build a road, we need to extend the water line, that kind of thing. And so, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a major investment. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But we'll be able to say, well, here's the gain, economic and fiscal impact. The gain is $10 million.
Right.
But to get that $10 million, the public sector may have to put up $1 million. I'm just picking numbers out of here.
Right. This is Willington.
Are you willing
This
to
is Willington,
spend?
$650,000.
Hmm?
This is Willington, $650,000.
Okay. Or 200,000 or zero, preferably
Right, I
zero.
get what you're saying.
But you can see in pretty plain numbers, what that, the investment to return, the return on investment is basically, what we're looking at there. But then if there's a fund, there's a gap and there's a fund, so the public sector has to come up with X dollars in this scheme of development, in this one particular project. Well, so then, can that be covered with grants from the state or federal government? Selling a piece of excess property, talking with Joe about project I did, so tax increment finance rescue strategy for Texas A&M and a big Jack Nicklaus golf course that they funded the whole thing through a TIF, giant TIF, 950 acres. But the Bryan, Texas was on the hook for the bond payment. And the development wasn't contributing. And so the town had $1 million that they had coming up in the calendar that they had to pay, and they had no way of paying it. So,
Bad planning.
I got hired to help sort that out, and we found a piece of property that was sort of, not earmarked for anything in particular for the development. So we were able to sell the property for $1 million. That paid the bond, the debt service on the bond.
Yeah.
The whole project moved forward, and all lived to fight another day.
In the interest of time, then we have an implementation action plan. Right. Works, is that okay? Can I move on?
Yep.
Which is work stream 8, right?
Yep.
And this feeds into directly, I believe, into the development strategic plan, but. So a series of clear, concise stops, excuse me, I can't read and I don't have my other glasses. Steps designed to assist the town of Willington with a seamless transition from strategic process, planning process, implementation, will be laid out under the work area. Help me understand what we're looking at here.
Are you on work area 8 or 9?
8.
So, the implementation plan, we want to be really well into that by the time we finish this study.
Yeah.
Right, so we want to, I talked about like a seamless transition from planning into implementation. So we want to be implementing as the plan is being wrapped up in the final months, right? So that's bringing, hey, I've got a pharmaceutical company over here. I think you guys would like to meet them, whatever that kind of turns out to be. But it's also be written out in the report, and sort of usually sometimes a 12-month plan, then sometimes depending, a year, 3 years, 5 years,
Yeah.
Roles and responsibilities for the public sector, private sector, nonprofits, if they play a role, institutions, that would be like a university and things like that. And so who does what, when, and how, in order to make the plans, recommendations a reality, and that you get the tangible results in terms of the economic development that you're seeking.
And then we have economic development strategic plan, final report, and then I think we agreed to add a presentation of recommendations, which I think is pretty good. I mean, I don't think we need to go into that too deeply. I do envision, a public hearing kind of, not.
Yeah, of course, yes.
I shouldn't use terms I don't. A public presentation with question and answer and stuff like that. And one of the things that this group should be looking at and thinking about is how do we pull that off so that it's useful? How do we plan to get participation in these things? We've had other groups in town, the school building committee, that have tried to get participation, and it never happens until the very end, and then everybody's angry.
We don't want that.
No, so what steps could we as an economic development group, and this means marketing, that's like headlines.
Well, the one thing we don't have, that isn't even in the report here, is communications in the town. And nothing's going to happen unless we do some sort of study of communications or what here. We have no newspaper. And the Journal Inquirer used to cover Willington somewhat when we put things in. You had to argue with them. And Willimantic has a paper there, but we have no communication in the town here. And we always say, well, you can go online and you can see. Well, there are a lot of people that don't use online. That's a problem. And a lot of people my age that don't use a lot of it, even though it is available. through the library, we have hotspots and everything else we can use. So we need to find a way to put communications in the town so that every time there's a meeting here, there can be an update, just even a couple paragraphs. This is what we're looking at here. This is what we're doing now. You know, send your comments to Matt, load him with them. But that's a very, very big issue in this town. And unless we solve that, we're
That's a
always
good-
gonna have the problem with everybody reacting just
At the end.
before we have a vote.
Right, and that's an important element here for sure. I'm glad you brought it up. And I think, you know, the stakeholder interview process is part of that, you know, me and others getting out and just talking one-on-one, because people talk to each other, you know, and like, you know, conversation I had with Kathy at the library, you know, earlier today. You know, she'll talk to somebody else, and, you know, some guy stopped in here, and it looks like they're doing an economic development. Not that the stakeholder interview will carry that communication process by itself by a stretch, but we build on that, and then we're gonna have some of these interim. We'll talk more about that, and it obviously needs to be, you know, a group decision, but I think to the extent that they can be made enjoyable, you know, I've been known to like bring out the barbecue, you know, spread, you know,
So you're gonna fly your barbecue out here, is that it?
you know, cakes and cookies and, you know, refreshments and, you know, so to make it enjoyable, because if you just, I don't know, people, you know, to get people to come out in the evening, you know, and God bless you guys for, you know, coming out and spending your time, and people got a lot going on, you know, and it's, and a lot of times what you know, sometimes, I'm not saying here, but, you know, people that will come out are the ones that have the axe to grind.
Yeah, and you have other things as well. I mean, I recently switched careers. I now work second shift. 3 to 11, so I have Mondays. That's why these things are on Mondays.
I see.
That's puts a crimp in your style, let me
We'll
tell
go
you.
ahead and we'll accommodate.
Yeah. Anyway,
But to communicate, let me give some further thought to that, and, you know,
You have
maybe
success
we could
with,
do
like,
some
the
kind
other
of.
towns you've worked in?
Hmm?
So like Mansfield and Tallinn, you were doing your studies, did you see an abundance of community outreach when you did your studies with them, or?
No.
All right,
Partly
so
because
it's
it
not,
was
we're
just,
not just like
it
a
was
resident
the-
stepchild
it
everywhere.
was the nature of the assignments in each case, for one thing, because in Tallinn, there was some, and we did stakeholder interviews more with like because it was more of a straightforward, like a financial analysis, you know, not so much, because they were they already done outreach about how the opinions of the people about additional multifamily housing, and it was somewhat split. In fact, their Economic Development Commission, you know, had a member or two that wasn't real, this is my take on it, you know, wasn't real keen on the idea of additional multifamily housing, but that's why the assignment there was just to reduce it down to a matter of the numbers, not a judgment call on whether you want, you know, more of this kind of person or that demographic or what, you know, and so, and then the same thing with the Mansfield project. That was a straightforward, basically like a financial calculation for the affordability percentages and stuff like that, you know, but I've done, you know, a lot of public outreach over the years, that's for sure, and it's important. And so, but there are ways to make it, one thing you don't want to do is to have an unveiling at the end.
Right.
It's like the worst thing you can do. So you want to, you know, you want to build a trust, you want to be aware that people can, my door is always open, as they say, you know, for people to contact me, and we'll work out the town hall meetings and things in greater detail as we get into this, but again, doing it, in a way that introduces people to concepts. It's clear that their feelings and their opinions are being taken into account. You can't make everybody happy. But,
Yeah. Joan, I'm gonna bring up your thought on some different way of communicating to our Board of Selectmen as well. I'm gonna bring it up to the Board of Selectmen as well. The issue is that we have no way of communicating and we'd like to see enhanced communication. And let's see what we can come up with. Maybe there's some ideas out there. Maybe we can address this somehow.
Like our Willington wire is only quarterly.
Right.
Okay, so that presents a problem, but also the fact that it's online. How many printed copies do we make and distribute and put in the post office and?
Right. Can we?
If you want anything done, you have to put it in the post office or make a sign on the green. I mean, that's our communications forms here. So, I think printed is good. Because you don't turn off your computer and forget it. You got that paper. And if you print it on orange paper, they're not gonna lose it. And they're gonna say, what on earth is this? And
So
look at it.
if you get something on the computer and it says Town of Willington, along with a lot of other things, delete.
Yeah.
Or if you get something in your mail, you can't delete it until you actually look at it.
It might be
You have to look at it
that
first.
every 2 months we put something in there.
Let me-
Because we can plan library programs, but there's always things that are gonna come up.
Let me work on.
Yeah.
The town of Ashford does that. They pay, the town budget covers a monthly Ashford citizen, which is everybody, it goes to everybody in town once a month. It is prepared in-house, put together, and goes out. I thought the Willington Wire used to be that way, and maybe 2018-ish, they decided to just go
Do you
online.
support Ashford?
Yes.
Can you give me a copy of that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
They also have the Journal Inquirer. There's towns that do the same thing, but they're put together by the newspaper. So that they give you the cost, you give them the material in advance, and then they fund it in part by businesses that just take out ads. There's town of East Windsor that I work in, the selectmen, they pay for a service, and he does every Thursday night a recorded voicemail that goes out to the phone lines in town. They listen to it weekly. There's, Ashford also has Text My Gov, which is an online subscription base.
Let's table for
A
now,
lot of things out there.
but I'm interested in following up with you, Mike, on that. And
Yeah.
taking some notes and then taking it to the board.
I have the information, even including costs. We looked at this. I had suggested the town use maybe a partial of the remaining ARPA funds for a 1-year trial. Pay for a year, do something, get the feedback. It was something that I spitballed. I didn't actually formally present it, but because this has come up several times,
I got it.
I think it's
It's really good.
worth considering.
I do too.
The last thing I want to say about the schedule, because we're talking about it, a lot of this stuff is all based upon fiscal impact and how to get people involved. So right now, this time of year, next year, which is approximately 12 months, we're going to be starting the whole budget cycle again. So this culmination happening just before the town goes into the budget season is probably a time of year when there's some logic to presenting some of these findings, and people might be interested as they start thinking about what the budget process is gonna look like. So that would be basically January of 2025. When people start thinking about what's the budget look like, what's the mill rate look like, what are the increases?
Well, the interest level will be higher as well.
So that's 11 months away, but it's just a thought that came to mind about the
Yeah.
timing.
And we're cognizant of that. Appreciate you bringing it up. And, in the RFP, you talked about like a 1-year study period. That's the word. And I think, we're budgeted for that, and we're working on that timeline, although I will say that I would expect to have a good portion of the work done in the next 4 to 6 months, okay? So that we'll have our arms around it, we'll have our conceptual development programs, we'll have at least the preliminary numbers on the economic and fiscal impacts. A good portion of the work I plan to have done in that 4 to 6 month period. Then we've got that next 5 months or whatever to you know, concentrate more on getting our ducks in a row for implementation, finessing the, you know, making sure that the public is on board, have some more fun events, whatever it might be,
Jiggling things
you know,
around.
and so, you know, then gives you time to, organize on the fiscal planning front, because you'll have numbers at least pertaining to the economic development plan, you know, for consideration.
What are some of the key elements that the various departments in town have to understand and agree to? What can we do to communicate with the other groups in town, whether it's the finance group, whether it's planning and zoning, that, because we are gonna reach out to them. But what are some of the key elements that they need to understand about the strategic plan and why someone would want to come in here and drop $5 or $10 million in development for a 40,000 square foot building? Having done this myself in various cities, I'm very risk averse when it comes in. If I'm gonna go in and know I'm gonna do 3 or 4 months worth of work, that might get shot down because it's a town meeting.
Right.
I'm not even going. You know, I'm not. I opened up in Chicago and there was a tip on the table as long as I used Mayor Daley's daughter's law firm. You know, so you really have to understand.
Yeah.
Each department needs to understand why we're doing this, and I think the pro forma that we talked about will be the incentive. You know, people used to come to Willington. I'm here 35 years. I moved here from New York City. Couldn't get over no water and wells and septic tanks, but when I 2-acre zoning, it was all great, you know? But what I couldn't get over was they wanted to maintain that lifestyle, which I've grown to accept. I love it, you know?
That's why I moved here.
And exactly, and now we've got to figure out how to protect it,
Right.
knowing that that plow that comes down your road, which is 120 grand, 5 years from now is gonna be 160 grand.
Mhm.
And the guy or gal driving it, just based on inflation, these are things we can't control.
Right.
And that's, I'm just trying to understand the key element of how you can get the various groups in town to know, we're not gonna get a developer in here if it's all based on a meeting in May, town hall, we're gonna shoot it down. All right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, to answer that is kind of part parcel of the work, you know? I mean, and how that gets finessed and brought along and supported and so forth, so that, you know, information has a lot to do with it, you know, and in terms of these stakeholder interviews, I mean, I think it would be good. I would like to talk with folks from those department heads and folks like that, just to hear what they have to say about it, you know, gosh, if we only had a, you know, bigger pump over at the Spring House, you know, okay, bigger pump, you know, if we only had a better hotel. And, you know, I make light of it a little bit, but it's not easy, you know, but it's communication, it's being able to present the argument. It's almost like a legal argument that we're putting together here in a way, you know, but it's an economic argument that,
Case and the options
Yeah.
and consensus.
Yeah. and then here's what it could look like. Not an architectural design, you know, that could be part of the next step at some point for you guys, you know, but, and you try and work through, try to head off as many of those, the problems that the public is gonna say, well, what about, you know, how much traffic is that gonna create on River Road? Well, I gotta have an answer for that, maybe not like exactly, but at least thought through that, you know, and so, or in some cases, oh gosh, I mean, I get off on too many tangents here, but, it's, you wanna work toward that buy-in. And so that you say, well, and you wanna be able to say, we are, you you know, respectful and preserving the quality of life that you have here. That's why Willington's a great town that it is. So we don't wanna, you know, we're not gonna change that. We just wanna perhaps improve the bottom line a little bit.
Well, and we want to continue it into the future.
Want to continue it.
Here's how you do it.
Preserve it.
Here's how you do it.
Sustainability,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, I'm sorry, did you follow?
No, I just want to give Ernie, our mission statement here at the EDC is in close coordination with the town of Willington Planning and Zoning Commission and other town boards and commissions. The EDC will seek to promote development that provides goods and services, employment opportunities, and tax revenues compatible with the character and the vision of the town for the future. That's what we're talking about.
Exactly what we're talking about.
The town of South Windsor has a really interesting map that they've prepared. It's a dashboard through ArcGIS. And it's a friend of mine worked with them to put it together. And basically what it does is it shows all of the tax abatements that have been issued for the town over the last, I don't know what the exact period is. But the idea is you go and you click on a project. It tells you when the abatement was granted, when is it effective until, the amount of taxes that they have abated and the number of taxes paid. So you can click on a property, you can click on a project you may hate, and it's gonna tell you, well, we've abated $1.6 million, but over the period of whatever, they paid 7 million in tax.
Interesting.
Then the whole idea behind it was they wanted people to, there was a sense, growing idea that the town was abating all the taxes for commercial and the residents are continuing to pay. And so they put together this map to show we're giving away some to get some. We had to make this work, and it's a kind of an interesting, it's a graphic, so it's
Interesting.
easier for the average person to see it. It's kind of cool.
That is cool. I've never heard of
That
that.
is neat. And then also, after it ends, it extends into perpetuity, those taxes.
Right, yep, goes away and they pay, yep.
Right.
And it shows all that in there.
Right, so, we're bumping up against time, I think.
Okay.
Good conversation. I think, as next steps, if you guys agree, Cheryl and Bill, so maybe we can, Mike, can you send out an email that says, here's our initial thoughts on key stakeholder interviews, and we can add to it. And then we can send it off to Ernie, and Ernie can go, I like all of this, and you're missing these kind of groups. Would that be a good starting point?
Yeah.
All right. And with that, if it's okay with everyone else, we'll go to President Speak.
Can I,
Yes.
my two things that I'm gonna haunt you on.
Oh,
Number one, the town seal, okay? We have to do something. It's really, I've given you diagrams of suggestions that we do for it. Or we can go and look at other people, but the supposed spool of thread that looks like, I don't know, looks like an egg roll. It doesn't say what you want it to say. You want it to understand that it's thread number one to begin with, and putting some buttons in there because we don't want to ignore the button factories that were here, something like that. We have to clean up the seal, make it a little fancier, that kind of thing, and make it a little more, I guess, upscaled than what we've had. The other thing is, I look, every time I come into town, I don't see the signs. We're supposed to have signs coming into town. Now, if we do the signs that some towns have, where they just say, welcome to Willington, and you've got the seal, it doesn't say anything. What if we contact an artist like Pat Morris, okay? And have Pat draw up a design for a big sign saying, welcome to Willington. If you go through Stafford Springs, you know, just before you go the curve up the CDS, there is that old wall of a factory or something, and they put all those painted pans. She did them. So she knows what she's doing, and she can do us a sign with a, oh, I don't know, maybe an old-fashioned grist mill and a river and a factory and the town green and chickens running along the roads, which is what I know is most in Willington, something like that. She'd be a good person, and you get that little colonial pediment on top, and you get this nice picture, and on the backside, it says, come back soon, and you've got the town seal. So that you don't ignore it, but something colorful that most towns don't have. And it will set us aside a little bit and people will notice it. So we need one that end and that end of 74. And there's no reason why those can't be up as soon as spring thaw. We've got carpenters in town, keep our money local. We do have, if there's ARPA money left, let's grab it. And use some of it.
Mike, what's the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Mike, what's the status of our signs? We have them produced, right?
The construction's complete. We have, the verbal agreement from the person on River Road. So we're saying, yes, that's fine. I'm happy to have you put your sign on the property. So we've sent them the actual written agreement to have them sign. And,
When do we expect that back?
we sent it to him about 2 weeks ago. He, is a part-time professor at UConn and admittedly was not paying attention to any of his, stuff coming through to him. So he kind of sat on it for a while and apologized, but, we want to have the written agreement so that we have the ability to.
And that one, correct me if I'm wrong, but that one, when we have the written agreement, when he signs it, it's ready to go in the ground in the spring, right?
Yes, they're there. I mean, they'll put it in as soon as they can. So depending on frost, as soon as they can get it in, it'll go up. It's ready to go.
Can you ask Jeff? I'll call Jeff. I'd like to call Jeff and ask him about the come back soon idea.
On the backside,
That's a great idea.
the way that we kind of had talked about it, that to have them positioned accordingly based upon speed, they'll be at a bit of an angle. So I don't know if the backside will be visible.
Okay.
We talked to Jeff, or you could talk to Jeff.
I'll call him. And then what about the other ones? We have two other signs budgeted.
Yep, so, I spoke to the developers of the Dollar General parcel and they have since divested themselves of the property. He's working on getting me a contact for the management folks that have it now so that we can do the same.
Is there any kind of database we can go to try and find out who those people are? Or?
We know who the actual owner on paper is, but I'm trying to get an
That's what I
actual,
mean. Do we know?
there's no public information other than the agent for the business.
What's the name of the developer that developed it and sold it?
Garrett Holmes.
Garrett Holmes?
Yeah, so the guy, his name is Matt Ucolito, and he is the gentleman who was involved in the project, who's now working to get me a name for the company that's based in New York
Do you need
State.
me to call him? I can call him.
No, I actually know him well from that, working with him on that whole process, and I just, he's not sure he still has that leverage point, but
You should be able to get us a name at least.
yeah, and if we can't, the thought would be to try to just see if we can move it a little bit west so that it
And the
still
third,
is in there.
and the third one would be.
We don't have a third.
Okay.
We will for this coming budget cycle in July. We'll have, assuming nothing changes with the budget, we'll be able to go 2 by 2.
Is the artwork done on
The rendering,
the artwork?
the sign face is manufactured, yeah, based upon the renderings that he presented to the group here.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's how many of those? Two? Or two?
Is it economic development that gave the library part of the ARPA funds for our development? I have to say thank you. I don't know if you managed to come to any of our events. We had 4 main events for the whole town. We had dance. We had a lot of fun with that. We had a dance. We had a family picnic at Rec Park. With all kinds of activities going on. We had a very formal,
Yep.
what do you call it, reception. Okay, where all the old librarians were invited and the state representatives were there, et cetera. And then our last one was a pajama party for kids with Santa Claus at Christmas time. So we tagged all the bases. Our motto is that great libraries create community. And so that's our part for creating community. And I'm very heartened by what I've heard here with people being interested in bringing everybody involved. I think this is a great thing.
So Ernie, our bond payments for library was a big investment for our town. It's been very successful, and they're over in, it's either 2 or 3 years, I think it's 2. So that provides some headroom moving forward.
That's a beautiful building, by
It
the
is.
way.
Yeah, Mike, did you have anything you wanted to
I
add?
just want to say, I've been in this town now about 14 years. I mean, I'm on planning and zoning. I have a small business
Yeah.
here in town. And that I'd like to kind of be a liaison a little bit or a conduit between planning and zoning, be a little bit more involved in the EDC. 'Cause I'm not going anywhere and I've been rooted here for quite a while and just see if I can help the town develop and progress.
So
forward for the future.
there you go, Mike. That sounds like an offer to me. We'll take you up on your offer. Thank you very much for offering to change.
Meeting adjourned.
Desire to volunteer.
Yeah, I did. All in favor, say aye. We'll talk and we'll put something together. Would that be okay? All right, thank you.
Can I just make sure I understand correctly that you want me as the first step to work with John, we'll put together the stakeholder interviews. We'll send it to you guys and you can add to it and provide comments, and when you're comfortable, we'll send it to Ernie for his review.
Yeah, that'd be
That's the
good.
homework.
I think so.
I just wanna make
And
sure.
Maybe as part of that, Ernie, maybe you could just put together the 10 or 15 or something and send it over to this guy.
I will.
We'll combine them and,
Yeah,
okay.
and it'll be a group thing. It'll be ding, ding, and then ding.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense on camera, but that's the way it'll work.
We'll get started on that.
All right, so I think the next thing would be adjournment. I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second that.
You'll second it. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 No opposed. Thank you. We are adjourned.